The greatest warrior in creation, Tulkas the Strong, served as champion of the Valar, so skilled he wielded no weapons and fought with bare hands. Content within the timeless halls, it was only after Tulkas witnessed Melkor's attack in the First War that he descended onto Arda, determined to defend the Valar and the world. Unlike the selfish rage which propelled Melkor to violence, Tulkas was noble and good-hearted, laughing as he charged into battle, producing an aura which vanquished darkness. Fearing his wrath, Melkor retreated from the world, allowing the Spring of Arda to unfold when the Valar completed their labors and lived in peace. Yet the Dark Lord eventually returned, built a secret fortress in the north, recruited an army, and began a campaign of revenge. Meanwhile, as the Valar enjoyed their last days of peace, Tulkas the Strong married Nessa the Dancer, sleeping long and deep after the joyous celebration. Learning the greatest threat to his plans was temporarily neutralized, Melkor took this opportunity to strike, launching an attack so devastating it reshaped the lands and darkened the skies. Resettling upon the continent of Aman, the Valar discovered Melkor was in Middle-earth, preying upon the newly awakened elves to create the Orc race, prompting Tulkas to advocate strongly in favor of the war for sake of the elves, in which he personally fought and defeated the Dark Lord. Though Melkor eventually feigned repentance and was freed from captivity, Tulkas never believed it and argued against his release. One of the Dark Lord's most feared and hated enemies, the second prophecy of Mandos foresaw a final confrontation during Dagor Dagorath at the end of the world, where Tulkas the Strong would be joined by the Maya Eonwe and human Turin Turambar to fight Melkor one last time. The wife of Tulkas and sister of Orome, Nessa the Dancer was known for her beauty, grace, and speed, spending her days admiring the beauty of the natural world while dancing and running with deer. Living in the house of Tulkas within the city of Valmar, their home featured a spacious courtyard where she served wine to her husband's friends and champions as they competed in athletic games. One of Nessa's favorite places to visit was the forest of her brother Orome the huntsman, who like his sister had a deep bond with nature, breeding the finest animals in the world. Living in the house of Orome with his wife Vanna, the great rider delighted in hunting, trapping, skinning, and leatherwork, straying further from his homeland than any other Valar in his pursuit of new game. During the years of the trees, Orome traveled beyond Valinor into the darkened lands of Middle-earth, where he was enraged to learn Melkor created terrible beasts and monsters, setting off on a crusade to wipe them out. Whereas Tulkas was known to be cheerful even while fighting, Orome was fearsome in his wrath, creating an aura so menacing it put fear into the Dark Lord. Matters then grew worse when the huntsman discovered Melkor was turning elves into orcs, and thus returned into the west to inform the other Valar so they could launch the war for sake of the elves. As a consequence of the years Orome spent in Middle-earth, traveling with specially bred animals from Valinor, some had offspring, producing the lineages of highly prized species in later ages, like the Mearas horses and kine of Arau oxen. The wife of Orome, Vanna the Ever-Young, was beautiful and beloved by the natural world, with flowers blooming and birds singing in her presence. The most famous of her servants were the Maiar Arien, best known for moving the sun through the sky, and Melian, who moved to Middle-earth, married an elven king, and reigned as Queen of Doriath for centuries. Dressed in garments woven from flowers, Vanna spent her time visiting gardens and the forest of her husband. The brother of both Lorien and Nienna, Mandos the Doomsman, acted as ruler of the afterlife, serving in the halls of Mandos, where the spirits of the dead gathered to face judgment. The husband of Vaire, Mandos knew much about the past, present, and future, but did not reveal it to anyone unless given permission by his ally Manwe, who like him best understood the vision they saw in the timeless halls. Among the few warnings and prophecies revealed, Mandos informed the Valar when the elves were set to awaken, allowing Varda to create the stars in the sky as a source of light for the eastern continent. When the Noldor abandoned Valinor to wage war against Melkor in Middle-earth, they were forbidden from returning in the Doom of Mandos, which foresaw terrible consequences upon those who departed. He also predicted the end of the world in the second prophecy of Mandos, stating that Melkor would return for a final confrontation during Dagor Dagorath. Known for his grim personality and cold judgments, even Mandos was charmed by the famous love between Beren and Lúthien, who both died before having a chance to live a life together. Thought to be the greatest love story in Middle-earth, the human Beren undertook the seemingly impossible task of recovering a Silmaril from the Dark Lord Melkor in order to prove himself worthy of Princess Lúthien, the immortal daughter of the Elf King Thingol and Maya Queen Melian of Doriath. Despite succeeding in his quest and winning her hand, it cost Beren his life, which then caused Lúthien to die from grief. Not only were they robbed of a life together, they were also separated in the afterlife, as the halls of Mandos kept the spirits of men and elves apart, awaiting their differing fates. Yet even in death, Beren would not be denied, and refused to cooperate until he saw Lúthien one last time for a proper goodbye. Meanwhile, Lúthien's immortal spirit, which awaited rebirth into the world, sang a song of such sorrow it moved Mandos to pity, resulting in an exception to be made for the loving couple. With Lúthien's blessing, it was decided she would surrender her immortality to share in the fate of men, but in exchange, she and Beren would return to Middle-earth, where they could live out the rest of their mortal lives together. The wife of the Doomsman, Vaire the Weaver, dwelt with her husband in the halls of Mandos, where she wove the story of the world onto its walls. When the Noldor king Finwë sacrificed his life so his first wife Miriel could return to Valinor, she entered the service of Vaire so she could dedicate herself to recording the history of the House of Finwë. The brother of Mandos and Nienna, Lorien was the master of visions and dreams who dwelt with his wife Este in the great gardens they maintained. Becoming famous amongst the immortal races, the gardens of Lorien were one of the most beautiful places in the world, teeming with wondrous and enchanted wildlife. Gifted with the power to produce a vivid dreamlike state, Lorien was known to grant visions to the elves who visited his gardens. The wife of Lorien, Este the Gentle, was the healer of hurts and weariness, known to wear gray colors and sleep during the day. Living in the gardens of Lorien, she spent much of her time resting upon a small island at the center of Lake Lorien. Following the destruction of the two trees in Valinor, Este argued vehemently that their new system of illumination be divided into a day and night cycle to help with the growth and prosperity of wildlife. The sister of Mandos and Lorien, Nienna, was the Lady of Pity and Mourning, who spent most of her time alone in the halls of Nienna. Known for compassion and mercy, she sometimes visited the halls of her brother, providing comfort for the souls of the dead, and was an instructor to the Maya Olorin, instilling in him a deep empathy, which helped fuel his dedication to liberating Middle-earth from Sauron in the Third Age. A Vala of great power, her tears watered the ground to grow the two trees of light, golden fruit of the sun, and silver flower of the moon. When the Dark Lord Melkor feigned repentance in order to be released from captivity, Nienna was one of the only Valar to speak in his favor, demonstrating her profound sense of compassion for all living beings. While the rest of the Valar made their home upon the continent of Aman, Ulmo, the Lord of Waters and King of the Sea, lived within the depths of his aquatic realm, taking no wife and little part in the events of Valinor. Though he was a staunch ally of Manwë and one of the chief architects of Arda, he only attended council meetings when absolutely necessary. Known to play his Ulumuri horn, it was Ulmo who best understood the original Ainulindale, and as a result, the elves claimed they could hear echoes of this music in the waters of Middle-earth. Of all the Valar, Ulmo cared most for the children of Eru, watching over them and intervening on their behalf when possible. Even after the other Valar recused themselves from interfering in the affairs of Middle-earth, Ulmo continued to use the rivers and lakes to stay informed and send help. Served by the Maiar Ose, Uinen, and Salmar, he told the children of safe places to build settlements, and even sent warnings of imminent attack. During the Years of the Trees, Ulmo uprooted the island of Tol Eressëa and used it as a ferry to bring the elves to Valinor. Nearing the end of the War of Great Jewels, when the Dark Lord was on the verge of conquering Beleriand, Ulmo saved the life of the heroine Elwing, who held a Silmaril and avoided capture by throwing herself into the sea. Granting her the ability to take the form of a white bird, Elwing reunited with her husband Eärendil and joined in his mission to seek aid from the Valar, ending in the War of Wrath and defeat of Melkor. With so many Valar of differing skills and interests, they were sometimes categorized and grouped together in order to provide insight into their history, levels of power, and specializations. Among the many names given to these groups, the 8 most powerful were called the Aratar and included Manwe, Aule, Orome, Mandos, Ulmo, Varda, Yavanna, and Nienna. Of those considered the chief architects of Arda, there was Manwe, Aule, and Ulmo. As for the brothers Mandos and Lorien, both gifted with powers on matters beyond the physical world, they were called the Feanturi, meaning masters of spirits. Finally, there was Tulkas, Aule, and Varda, who distinguished themselves as the greatest and most hated enemies of the Dark Lord Melkor. A special thanks to all those who contribute to Civilization X, like Sir Bob of the Buoy, Ishmam Ahmed of Shamidiana, Faith the Wandering Huntress, and Rania Senestella, Keeper of Ancient Lore. If you'd like to help the channel, please go to patreon.com/civilizationx, where you can get early access to videos, vote on future content, and access the Patreon-only series, Heroes of Lore and Legend.